Welcome to our Google Hangout with Sean Atkins with the Atlanta Housing Authority. He's going to spend a few minutes with us today talking about the waiting list, the Section 8 waiting list that's going to be opening up next month, the first time actually in many years. How you doing, Sean?
I'm doing great, Dave. How are you?
I'm great. Well, why don't you, I got a few questions for you, some from me, some from our users, and thought maybe we'd start with, why don't you give a brief introduction about the Atlanta Housing Authority, how many people you serve, how many staff you have, the various programs you've got.
Sure, no problem. Well, as Dave stated, I am Sean Atkins. I am the Vice President of External and Governmental Affairs and Corporate Communications for the Atlanta Housing Authority. The Atlanta Housing Authority has been around for about 76 years. We currently serve about 50,000 participants, and that is through about 21,000 plus households. We have several different programs. What we're going to talk about today is really our Housing Choice Voucher program, which of course is our tenant-based Housing Choice Voucher program, most commonly known as Section 8. But we also have our AHA communities, which would be our public housing. We serve almost 2,000 households through our AHA-owned communities. We have what we call our AHA-sponsored communities. If you've been following the Atlanta Housing Authority, what you may know is that we were the first major city in the country to have public housing projects. We also became the first major city in the country to rid ourselves of large public housing projects. And so on 16 of those footprints where there once stood distressed, obsolete housing projects, we've revitalized those sites, and we call those our AHA-sponsored communities. And we serve quite a few families, almost 4,000, through that particular affordable housing program. And then we also have our project-based rental assistance, PBRA, and that is where it's privately owned developments, where we have a contractual agreement for a certain percentage of those units also that are made available and affordable and subsidized through the Atlanta Housing Authority. And we have supportive housing as well. So for our supportive housing, we are serving individuals and families that are at risk, at-risk populations. That would either be individuals or families who are homeless or near homeless. It would be those who have some type of disability, whether that is physical, mental, or developmental disability. We also serve youth who are aging out of foster care, as well as those families who have been separated through our supportive housing program. So that's sort of an overview of the programs that we offer at the Atlanta Housing Authority.
Okay, and where can folks get some more information about all those various programs you talked about? 50,000 people, that's a lot of people you all help. Want to make sure you can help some more.
Absolutely. People can go to our website. So if individuals are interested in our housing programs or in the history of the Atlanta Housing Authority, they would simply go to www.atlantahousing.org. They will be able to find all of this information.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and post your web address in the feed for this event. So most of our users know generally about the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program and how it works, but I know that your program is a little bit different from most of the programs across the country that our users might be familiar with. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I would say that the Atlanta Housing Authority is an MTW agency, and basically MTW is an acronym that stands for Moving to Work, and what that does is it allows us financial and regulatory flexibility. So for our Housing Choice Voucher program, what's different, I would say basically, is that we have a work requirement. So our work requirement for those who are interested in knowing about that is at least one non-disabled adult member between the ages of 18 and 61 is required to have legitimate employment for at least 30 hours per week. All other non-disabled household members between the same age bracket, that's 18 to 61, they're required to be engaged in either full-time work or full-time school or part-time work and part-time school. So it would be a combination of school and work. The other thing that I will say is probably a little different about our tenant-based housing choice voucher program is that also a part of our MTW flexibility is that we have submarkets. So our vouchers really no longer have a valuation per se. We've engaged the services of third-party real estate professionals, and we've had those professionals to study the Atlanta housing market. And so participant comes and they submits their request for tenancy approval to us. We go through a process that is called RIT determination. And so this provides greater housing choice for participants. So no longer would a voucher that is a two-bedroom evaluation of a certain amount. It is really based on the location and the submarket here in the Atlanta Housing Authority jurisdiction.
Interesting. So to be clear, does everyone in the household need to be working, or is just the head of household needs to be working? All the adults? Which is it?
So there must be at least one adult to meet our standard of 30 hours a week between the ages of 18 and 61 who are non-disabled.
Okay.
So if they are not disabled and between the ages of 18 and 61, one adult must meet our standard of 30 hours per week.
Okay.
All of the other adults, if they're not disabled and between the ages of 18 and 61, they must comply with a combination or either full-time work or full-time school or a combination of those. So when you ask if all adults, well, if the adult is elderly or disabled, they would be exempt from our work requirement. So individuals who are 62 years of age or older and persons with permanent disabilities as defined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development are exempt from our work requirement.
Okay, so let's say a family of four with a stay-at-home parent that's got a young child. The mom works, the dad stays at home, or vice versa. Would that family meet the work requirement?
If the mother is not disabled or if she's not elderly, then she would need to meet our work requirement.
Okay, but she could also be going to school.
That is correct.
Now, okay.
That is correct.
And what's the school requirement? It's a full-time student, as in, say, for example, the definition of a college full-time student is there a certain number of hours per week?
Yes. So a full student at an accredited college, university, technical school, community college, or it could be an adult literacy program.
Oh, okay, okay. So it doesn't necessarily even have to be college. It's some sort of job training.
Right. It doesn't have to be post-secondary necessarily.
Okay.
And if they are seeking additional skills, then through our case management services and our human development team, we provide case management services, and we've contracted with several organizations around the Atlanta area to provide either that adult literacy training or work development training, job skills. So for instance, we have a relationship with the Atlanta Workforce Development Agency, the Atlanta Urban League, also the Center for Working Families, as well as Literacy Action. So if they're not gainfully employed for 30 hours per week, through our case management process, we can refer them out to one of those organizations so that they can meet the compliance criteria.
Wow, this sounds like more than just a housing program. You've got job training connections in there for folks to help them improve their lifestyle. It sounds like a really progressive program. The Moving to Work program, I know at one point it was a demonstration with HUD. Is it still considered a demonstration?
It is still considered a demonstration, so in essence, it is the MTW demonstration.
And the Housing Authority has quite a bit of leeway in developing the rules around the program. Is that correct?
Well, we are afforded financial and regulatory flexibility. And so the idea is that it allows us to create housing programs that are specific to the Atlanta market. So as you know, the market is different in Atlanta than it is in New York or Miami or Chicago or Los Angeles and many other places around the country. So what MTW in essence does is it allows us to create policies that are specific to our market so that we can provide affordable housing opportunities. And for us, it's really important because we want to be able to do that in great living environments. And MTW has allowed us to do that.
Sounds like a great program. Let's get into some of the more specifics of the program. Are there specific income eligibility requirements? Folks are going to be familiar with other affordable housing programs, whether it's Section 8 or tax credits or whatever. Are there specific income eligibility requirements that folks need to take a look at when they're considering applying?
There are income eligibility requirements, and my best advice for any person who is interested in applying for our programs or registering for our waiting list when it opens, I would really recommend that they go to our website. Again, www.atlantahousing.org. There is a button that says Housing Choice Voucher or HCVP eligibility requirements. If they click that button, it will give them the household income requirements and other information regarding the Housing Choice Voucher program.
Okay, thanks, Sean, and we'll make sure we put a link to that particular page so folks can find it fairly easily. Next question, are there any specific local waiting list preferences? Many housing authorities across the country establish preferences for victims of domestic violence or veterans or homeless persons. The list can go on for quite a while. Does the Atlanta Housing Authority, other than working persons, do you have any other preferences?
No, we do not. So to register for our waiting list that will be opening on the 6th of January, and that'll be open for 7 consecutive days to the 13th of January, there will be no preferences.
Okay.
We do provide housing. We partner with several other organizations around the city. So for instance, I've mentioned one of our programs is supportive housing. And so with supportive housing, we do partner with several other organizations to provide housing for military veterans, for instance. We also administer some VASH vouchers. And VASH vouchers, VASH is an acronym. It stands for Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing. So we provide housing for some of the demographics that you mentioned, but for our waiting list purposes, there are no preferences.
So yeah, I'm familiar with the VASH program, and it's a great program. I think it was introduced in 2010. I think it was around a $50 million a year expenditure through HUD, through the tenant-based voucher program, and it's actually been credited with reducing homelessness among America's veterans significantly over the last few years. So the VASH, the veterans vouchers, are not part of this waiting list. Is that correct?
That's correct. The VASH vouchers are not a part of the waiting list that we will open on January 6th at 9 a.m. Till the 13th at 5 p.m. January.
Okay, so a little bit off topic, but if we have any veterans that are watching that are interested, how would they go about applying for a veteran voucher?
They would actually go to the VA. So we get referrals from our local Veteran Affairs office. So
Okay.
a veteran that is interested in a VASH voucher would go to the VA for services. If it is deemed that they are in need of housing, they would then be referred to us by the VA.
Okay, all right, and we'll make sure we post that and that our users know about that. All right, well, here's an interesting fact. Your waiting list hasn't been open since 2001. That's amazing.
Correct. So our waiting list has not been open in almost 14 years. At the time that we opened in 2001, we had about 20,000 applicants on that list. And so we have now completely exhausted that list. And so we're looking forward to opening our list in January so that we can start to provide additional housing choice vouchers to families in need.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the application? I understand it's online. We've got some links, or I think we will have some links to the application when it is online. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the online process?
Well, what I can tell you about the registration process for our waiting list that will open on the 6th of January at 9 a.m. and it'll close at 5 p.m. on January 13th. It's a Tuesday to a Tuesday, so 7 days. It will be an online process, and we'll be asking very basic questions: name, contact information, address, household income, information like that. If someone does not have access to the internet, they could call our hotline, and our hotline number, what I'll share with you is 1-800-603-9291. Again, our hotline number is 1-800-603-9291. We will have individuals that will man our hotline that will be able to take that information and register for those persons who either need a reasonable accommodation, language translation services, or communication in an alternate format. Through that hotline, we'll be able to do that. The process will take no more than 10 to 15 minutes. Once it is complete, the individuals who've registered will receive a confirmation number, and within 30 days after we close the waiting list, we will notify individuals if they've been selected. And we're looking to get to a number of 10,000 registrants to consist of our official waiting list, and that process will be handled by our third-party vendor, and it will be done through a computerized random selection process.
Okay, and about 75% of our users come to our website through mobile. Many of, probably about the same number of those folks are watching us right now on their mobile phones. Is the application available on a mobile phone?
That's a very good question. Yes, it is. So we also suspect that many people who will be registering for our waiting list will do so through their mobile phone. They can do that. In addition to calling the hotline, we've also established relationships with several organizations around the city, and we're calling those locations internet access sites. So public libraries, Atlanta Workforce Development Agency, the Urban League of Greater Atlanta, the City of Atlanta Recreation Centers, just to name a few, the Georgia Department of Labor, several YMCAs. They've all agreed to make their computers and internet access available to individuals who are interested in registering for our waiting list.
That's
so
great.
In addition to their mobile phone or their laptop or their PC, they could either call the hotline. Again, that number is 1-800-603-9291. They may do that, or they could go to one of our internet access sites.
Sounds like you've got it covered. Sounds like if you want to apply, it's going to be pretty easy to do so. Are there going to be any documents? Are there copies of paychecks or social security cards, anything like that when they apply?
Not for the registration process. To register for the waiting list, individuals will not need any documentation to complete that process.
So it's a pre-application, so it's pretty easy. That's good. What about credit or criminal background checks? None of that's going to happen at least until down the road. Is that correct?
That is correct. So to register for our waiting list, they will not need any documentation. There will not be any credit check or criminal background check at that particular point.
Okay. And we get this question frequently from our users. Where can I get a copy of the application? Which implies that it's a paper application. Is it possible to apply on paper?
No. The process will be strictly online. And we understand that for some individuals that will be a challenge, and that's why we've established the hotline, and that's why we've also made sure that we have secured several internet access sites around the city so that it becomes very convenient for individuals who do not have a computer or access to the internet, and also for those who require reasonable accommodation or need language translation services or communication in an alternate format.
Okay. How will folks know that their application was submitted and received officially?
Upon successful completion of the pre-application process, individuals will receive a confirmation number.
Via email?
That is correct.
Okay. So you talked about the 10,000 applicants that will be chosen from the greater pool that applies. When did you say? You said 30 days after the close of the application deadline when you expect to choose those 10,000?
That is correct. So within 30 days of the closing of our waiting list, the opening of our waiting list, within 30 days, individuals will be notified if they were selected for the official waiting list, if they're one of the 10,000 that were selected.
Okay. This is a question that we get a lot, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot, and that is, how long do you think it's going to take to get through those 10,000 applicants? You know, how long is it going to take if I apply in January? How long is it going to be before I might come up on the list? And how long is it going to take to get through all those 10,000 until the waiting list opens up again?
Okay, that's a very good question. And what we are hoping is that we will be able to work through this list within 3 to 5 years. So it won't be another 13 to 14 years like it has been, because as you stated earlier, we haven't opened the list since 2001.
Okay. We've gotten this question particularly a lot on your waiting list opening, and that is, if someone doesn't live in Atlanta but they'd like to move to Atlanta, may they apply, or do you have some local residency requirement?
If someone is not currently living in Atlanta and they would like to pre-register, register for our waiting list when we open it, they are more than welcome to apply. Individuals that if they are selected and if they receive a voucher, they must live within the Atlanta Housing Authority's jurisdiction the first year of being on the program. So they don't have to live in Atlanta to apply. But if they are selected, and if they, in order to receive a voucher, they must live within the Atlanta Housing Authority's jurisdiction within the first year if they're receiving a voucher.
Okay. Another user question is, if they receive a voucher, can they rent a house in an Atlanta suburb that's not within the Atlanta city limits?
No, that first year must be within our jurisdiction. And so there are suburbs here, you know, we've got the Atlanta Housing Authority, but there are other housing authorities that are in the Atlanta metropolitan area. And so they must live within the Atlanta Housing Authority's jurisdiction that first year in order to receive a voucher.
Okay. I just had another question handed to me from one of our online users right now, and they want to know, how long do they have to find a house once they receive the voucher?
Once they receive their voucher, you know, I think that the best answer to that, because I want to say it's 120 days, but I'm not completely sure because I don't work in the group that actually administers the vouchers, but I believe it's 120 days. But if they go to our website, www.atlantahousing.org, and they should be able to find that information probably under the Housing Choice Voucher eligibility requirements. It may speak to how long they will have to find suitable housing.
Okay, thanks, and we'll get that answer and make sure it gets published on the feed. Last question, and excuse me, from one of our users: is there a minimum tenant contribution required once someone receives a voucher?
Minimum rents are $125. So of course, as you know, the way the program works is usually participants are not required not required to pay more than 30% of their adjusted monthly income. If that amount is less than $125, they would be required to pay the minimum of $125.
Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions I had. Is there any closing thoughts that you wanted to throw out for our users?
Well, I first of all, Dave, would like to thank you and Affordable Housing Online for hosting this Google Hangout and for being interested in the Atlanta Housing Authority and the opening of our waiting list. I think that there's a lot of great information on our website. So what I'll leave any of the viewers with is, if you're interested in our waiting list or want to know more about the Atlanta Housing Authority, please go to our website, www.atlantahousing.org. If you're interested in the waiting list, there'll be information there at the website about the waiting list. There's also a very informative video that will speak to the process. And also, if you're interested in applying or want to get additional information about our waiting list opening, you can also, again, call our hotline at 1-800-603-9291.
Great. Well, again, folks, I've been talking with Sean Atkins with the Atlanta Housing Authority. I really appreciate your time today and talking to our users about the waiting list opening. Remember, it's January 6th to January 13th next year. Thanks a lot, Sean.
All right. Thanks, Dave. That's January 6th through January 13th. Thank you, Dave.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.